I am from Mexican origin. So my mother and father are from Mexico. My mother was born in Guadalajara, Jalisco, and my dad in Torreon, Coahuila. And they met in Tijuana. So Tijuana was sort of like has become home base for my family. In the early 70s, my parents married and came to the U.S. and uh, relocated in Los Angeles. And in 1974, I was born. So baby Frankie was born in East LA. I have two older sisters, a little brother. Everyone's all grown up now. I'm 46 years old, and I am bilingual of all things. I started off speaking Spanish as a boy, never mastered it. Then I began speaking English, also never mastered it.
Let me be the judge of that.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. Hope you give me a good grade.
Hey, I'll try. I'll try my best.
So I'll jump around, but sort of my claim to fame is rooted in the tragedy. When I was a young boy, 16 to be exact, I was wrongfully accused, arrested, and ultimately wrongfully convicted for a murder I didn't commit. This occurred in 1991, and I was sentenced in 1992 to 30 years to life plus life, which at the time symbolized an entire life behind bars. As you can imagine, as your guests can imagine who are listening in, a lot of these factors were not only about the case or the evidence that was used against me, but it was also, things that were used against me was the fact that that I come from a poor family who, couldn't afford an attorney, or I wasn't prepared to maybe answer the questions appropriately or sophisticated enough to be understood. That's really myself putting that pressure on myself. But at the end of the day, I was convicted, and I was sentenced to prison for many, many years.
Now, I have to, because obviously there's so many things to dive into here, but one of the first things that come to mind for me here is, you mentioned that you guys were poor at the time, and maybe you didn't have the right kind of representation, or the resources that could have helped more in this tragic situation as you described it. It's interesting because I think so many people around the world think about the United States and probably would never imagine the types of injustices that we experience in this country when it comes especially to the criminal justice system. I think probably a lot of people would be like, oh, come on, it's America, everybody gets a chance to, a just trial, and this could never happen in the United States, you know what I'm saying? But it does happen, and unfortunately, it does happen more often than we would want it to. Agree, disagree? What do you think?
I completely agree. I think there's a misconception that, and really the U.S. has become a model for other countries to mimic when it comes to the criminal justice system. And sadly, people are reforming. I've been working on reforming the system here in the United States, but obviously there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. And the fact that I mentioned that in one hand there was the evidence that was used against me that wrongfully convicted me, that's a whole conversation all to itself. But on the other hand, Sam, is things that are not evidence, things that shouldn't have been used against me. I'll say it that way.
Do you mind getting into that a little bit more, such as what,
Sure.
for example?
Here's an example that ties into your career and beyond words, right? So we're talking about this is beyond words. So my father, as I mentioned, immigrated from Mexico in the 70s, and he had a family here. But what he didn't assimilate completely was his vocabulary. So he was 99% speaking Spanish in his everyday life, and maybe 1% speaking broken English. And so when my father came to court to testify on my behalf, he had a translator. And watching my father struggle, understand, he knew some English, but watching him struggle to express himself, and watching the translator destroy the translation,
Mm.
um, it's difficult. But I think that if you're a viewer of that testimony, you almost minimize it. You almost don't take it serious. Um, this is no blame to my father. This is just part of the story.
Right.
But the reality is that, as an observer, as a juror, so someone who's there to listen to the evidence, what did one or two or three or four or all of them use my dad's inability to speak Spanish, I'm sorry, English correctly against him or against me? I wonder what that looks like. There is a prejudice against people who come to the U.S. and don't assimilate completely. If you don't assimilate, then you're not completely worthy, or you're not a red, white, and blue kind of American. And these are just things that, as an adult now, I look back and I wonder, and it really falls under prejudice versus anything else.
I really like that you brought up that expression to assimilate, and maybe I can just give a quick little explanation to anyone who's listening right now. So when you come to the United States from another country, sometimes there is the pressure to assimilate. Like, okay, leave your culture behind, forget your language, and become an American. Okay, well, that's a very dramatic example. It doesn't always have to be like that. I think assimilation can be a very, very positive experience also, but it depends how it's done. Makes sense? In this case, it sounds very sad to me. It sounds sad that your father wasn't able to speak English very well, and that other people took advantage of that uh, for their own gains. That sounds really, really sad to me. So there are different situations, definitely, when it comes to these things. And as a language coach, as a language teacher, I get this question sometimes too. It's like, oh, what about assimilation? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I think it can be a really, really good thing. I think when we move from another country to, when we leave our country and we move to a completely new country, there is the language, new culture, new people, a new lifestyle. I mean, look, I'm almost 39, okay? And I was 9 years old, just to give you a little bit of perspective, when my parents, my brothers and sisters, and I left our country in Montenegro. And we did this very suddenly. It was literally an overnight type of experience, an overnight type of decision, okay? Never in my wildest dreams could I imagine that, coming from a tiny little village in Montenegro, living a bunch of us in one house, all of us understanding each other, all of us just going about our day, going about our life. Never in my wildest dreams could I imagine that one day I'd wake up and then boom, I'm in Sweden. I don't
Mm.
understand the language. I don't understand the culture. I really don't know anybody other than my family and a few cousins that we had, right? So looking back at that time, I'm super happy that I assimilated quickly. And I'm very glad that I assimilated quickly. But let me be very clear. I never abandoned my culture. I never abandoned my languages. To this day, I speak my languages. I'm very familiar with my culture. But I'm also very glad that I, welcomed the Swedish culture and the Swedish language into my life, because later on it became a very important factor in my life. So I don't mean to go off the topic, but that's kind of just to explain, to assimilate a little bit for these students who are, practicing their English and listening to us. Another thing, going back to your father's story, you know, I tell my students all the time, use this as motivation, use this as a goal as you're trying to learn English, as you're trying to improve your language skills. try to become the boss of your own story. You know, with all due respect to all the translators out there, all the interpreters out there, because there are many of them out there who are doing an excellent job. I don't want a translator telling my story. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I don't want an interpreter telling my story. I want to be the one telling my story. So I'm so grateful that you share that with us, because your poor dad needed an interpreter, just like so many people do, you know? And that story isn't always told correctly. You know, I don't think that whatever is translated doesn't do justice to the original story. You know what I'm saying?
I agree. And you know, my father, and he said something that was very profound, and I cried hearing my father say, he said it in Spanish, but it was translated into English. But he said in Spanish was that I would not be here if I knew my son was guilty, and if he was guilty, I would be ashamed of him. It was a very passionate plea and very in-depth point that he was making. And it's hard to translate those heartstrings. It's hard to translate this profound message. And if you translate that in English, it's just, you don't capture that. But I will, to echo your sentiments about this. You know, I agree. You know, I wonder what my father felt like when he left court that day. And even though he was having trouble, because, you know, there's very simple questions of like, "Good morning, Mr. Carrillo," and he responded by saying "Good morning."
Right.
But he wasn't supposed to. He was supposed to stay in Spanish. And so there was a lot of that going on. But I wonder how we felt. And to your point about making sure that no one tells your story for you is vital. I think I learned from that moment in court that I'm talking to you about now with my dad, because I had a moment like that as well. You know, I was a 16-year-old young boy in an adult court with obviously all adults were in the room except me. And I come from a culture where I was brought up that if the adults are speaking, the children are quiet. You know, you wait your turn. You wait your turn, and you that was your way of respecting your elders. And in a situation like that I was in, I was waiting for my turn to speak. And when I had my turn to speak, I didn't feel I had the right vocabulary. I was afraid. So all these things really were based on my age. But I think even for an adult, you are in a very hostile, complicated situation, and it's very difficult. And I'll finish this point by just saying this. What I do now, and we're gonna be bouncing back and forth. But
Yeah,
what I do now,
no worries, please.
But you know, Sam, what I do now when I get an opportunity is to remind everyone, not only children, but specifically high school students, but also adults, obviously, that find your voice, practice your voice. Don't wait until you're in a situation where you have to be heard, and you've never practiced it. You've never heard yourself scream or be angry or amplify your voice, because that's what is needed at that moment. And sometimes people get in a situation where they have to respond verbally, and they freeze. And I think that's practice. That's definitely practice in the mirror if you have to, or practice foreseeing those type of scenarios, because you know sometimes life is just not very happy exchange like we're having now. Sometimes it can be very heated where you have to defend yourself, and using your words is obviously the best tool, the best weapon, but you have to keep those weapons sharp.
It's interesting that you bring up your dad, because I know that your dad was extremely special to you, and it really reminds me of my dad as well, and literally right now I'm these like vivid memories are kind of coming back to me of again, living in our little village and not having a luxurious life, but having a very simple and happy life. You know, living on a farm with a bunch of people together, and it's almost as if everybody knew their role, you know, and we were the kids, exactly what you just described, you know, and when it was lunchtime or dinner time, something would be put on the floor and we would sit there and we would eat and we would, I think we were very good, very obedient kids because that's how we were taught to be, you know. Um, very interesting transition, however, when we moved to Sweden, I feel like my parents became the kids. And
Mm,
as the oldest child, I kind of became the adult in the household, you know. And sometimes that can be misunderstood, because I don't mean that my parents were somehow immature and didn't know how to behave or something. No, they were very good parents, but they could not speak Swedish. They could not
mm,
speak a word of Swedish. And I remember this super vividly, this sense of shame and this sense of insecurity and wanting to talk and wanting to say hi to the neighbor, you know, and just not being able to do those very little simple
mm,
things, you know. And so languages, as you know, I think there are so many people around the world who love languages, you know, but to me, languages are, there's a deeper sense to language other than just, oh, I'm going to Mexico for 2 weeks, let me learn a couple of sentences, una tequila por favor, or something, you know what I'm saying, like
right,
that.
right.
It goes so beyond that for me personally, you know, because I've been in so many situations in my life where I I I I'm not dramatizing, I'm not exaggerating, where language was our tool for survival. And I'm sharing this right now because it really reminds me of your father. Even though I didn't know your father, I can totally imagine the situation that he, poor guy, tried to give whatever he had at the time with his
Mm,
English, and then whatever he didn't have, someone else took over. Yeah.
right,
And
right.
in this case, it was kind of taken advantage of and used in a bad way. Makes sense. um, so okay, so then, so did your parents ever share with you, like, okay, why did they leave Mexico, like what was the reason? I know a lot of people look at the United States and it's like the country of my dreams, the American dream. Like, what do you think was the reason for your parents to immigrate to the United States?
You know, so they met and married in Tijuana. So it's a border state, just
Right.
south of the border. So it's very, you're really in a, you know, then there was a very makeshift little fence that was dividing the countries. My father would venture back and forth to the U.S. We had family here already established in Los Angeles. But I think they fell for the American dream, like so many people do.
Mm.
Opportunity. You know, they've never said this to me, so I'm assuming this is why they came to the U.S. For work and you know, a better life for their children, obviously. You know, just simply the school dynamics in Mexico versus the ones in the U.S. And I think just lifestyle overall, and there was family here, so it was easy to transition from there to the U.S. But I will say that I've always looked at my parents, both my mother and father, as being conflicted in their assimilation to the U.S. culture. Mainly because, and I think it's not spoken about enough. But for Mexicans who are neighbors to the U.S., who visit Mexico on a regular basis, you're having this duality of you never really leave home because you can just drive 2 hours and you're there, or if you're in San Diego, you drive 5 minutes and you're there. Compared to someone who is from, you know, somewhere in Europe, who you are there's an ocean between you and your village or your town or your city.
Right.
So you almost have no choice but say, you know what, this is my new home. I
Mm.
have to embrace this because just because. Um, and because Mexico is the neighbor to the south, it's you can be there in a matter of hours, and so I think my parents who visited their hometown on a regular basis, and I can remember going as a young boy back to Mexico with my family. Obviously, they wouldn't leave us at home alone, and I can remember my dad. One day we were going to, I think we're in a store or somewhere near our family home, and he told us not to speak English. He told the children.
Mm.
And I don't know if it was just that specific part of town or it was a reflection on him that his children were speaking English and not Spanish. I was a little confused as to why my father would tell me not to speak in English. But he had a reason to do that.
Well, I mean, again, you're entering these interesting topics here, and for anyone that's listening that's not from the U.S., you know, basically you drive up to San Diego, which is about, I don't know, 2 hours from LA, something like that by car, 2.5 hours. You park your car and you get your passport, you get your bag or whatever, and you just walk to Mexico. I've done it several times, so you're absolutely right. It's a really, really cool experience because 1 minute you're in San Diego, you're in the United States of America, and then 10 minutes later you're in Tijuana, you're in Mexico. And even though these places are literally next to each other, you notice a world of a difference when you walk into Tijuana. You see poor kids, you see people who are working extremely hard for very little money. For us who travel there, who just go there maybe to spend the day, we will enjoy a beautiful meal. You'll eat a bunch of food and then you get your check and it's like, oh my gosh, $20 or $25. To me, it's like unbelievable. If we had this in the US, it'd be maybe 70, 80, $90. You know what I'm saying? So that's a very, very good example. And I swear to God, I've thought about that. I've toyed around with the idea of, well, that's interesting. Because I came from a from a place very far away. But what if you are so close to the US and you just, cross the border and then bam, you're in the United States? Like, what is home? You know what I'm saying? How do you establish that sense of home? And not to forget, which both you and I can relate to, if you are in LA, especially particular areas of LA, that's how I learned Spanish. Yeah, I feel like there are so many areas in LA where it's like, wait a minute, am I in LA or am I somewhere in Mexico? And I don't
Exactly.
mean that in a negative way. I mean that in a very positive way. You go to the supermarket and all you hear is Spanish. Okay, you go outside, you see a bunch of people, all you hear is Spanish. You watch the news, Spanish. You get on the bus, it's in Spanish. So I think it's a very unique experience, for sure, for sure.
Absolutely.
Uh-huh. So what is the American dream to you? Do you have a definition for it?
When I was in prison, and I just can't forget this. Thank you for asking me that. But when I was in prison, I met a man from Colima, Mexico. Un paisano mexicano from who was in prison as well. And he told me that him and his wife and two daughters all came to the U.S. together, and that prior to their transition from Mexico to the U.S., uh, his daughters would listen to him. They were the family was very united. Um, Things were just he described it as being a very happy family. And then he countered that by saying that when he was in the U.S., the job that he had, was long hours, and him and his wife both worked. Somebody would watch the girls at some point, and that the girls stopped speaking Spanish and began speaking English,
Mm.
and that that he remembered that one of his daughters would at some point would humiliate him because he wasn't speaking English as properly as maybe the girls were, because they picked it up early in life, and they were very fluent at this point. And he tells me that the biggest mistake he did was believing the lie that was told to him in a small town, that your life would be so much better in the U.S., and that your life would be so much more profound and enriched. And he said, just hearing this man speak about his family, it was really family dynamics that I'm referring to, that, he was really felt that he made a mistake. And I preface it by, that was my preface to your question, but I'll tell you that's the tragic story. But there are many stories, Sam, of people who come to the US and believe in the American dream of being able to take advantage of opportunities, redefining who they are, embracing people who have beliefs like them. And it's endless. The opportunities are endless, and it's really about like what your passions are. Your passions can be manifested in this country. And I've traveled many parts of the world, and I've noticed right away that what we have here in the US, and even though I started with a sad story, and the story was about family dynamics, but when you talk about the broader aspects about redefining yourself, especially if you come from a place that has limited resources, or that the ladder of opportunities might not exist. So it's really about comparing. So it just depends how you compare the U.S. and to what country, or to what, if it's about family dynamics, or is it about work? Is it about
Very true, very true. And another thing, I think this is a really good point, and I think it's an important point, because I think when you hear certain politicians nowadays, talk about immigrants and talk about how, oh, we have too many immigrants and blah, 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 some of them have to go home, whatever. Not everyone talks like this, but some people do. Okay, fine. I always think to myself, the way they're portraying this idea of being an immigrant, I think they portray it as something very simplistic. They portray it as something, all right, kids, all right, wife, all right, husband, shall we pack our bags, leave everything, and just go to the US tomorrow? Let's just do that. Let's just leave. Most of the time, it doesn't work that way. Most of the time, people, for whatever reason, based on fear, based on insecurities, based on desperation, just decide to take that crazy risk, and they leave everything behind. Okay, your friend's story about the family dynamics is not the first one I've heard. Believe me, I've heard several people talk exactly like that. Like, oh man, somehow I was seduced by this idea of coming to the United States and building a better life and getting this and getting that, but there was also a huge sacrifice to that. Now obviously there are two sides to every story. There's
of
always,
course.
can argue this, we can argue that. My thing is also, I think, another challenging thing that a lot of immigrants have to go through is generational differences. So suddenly kids are introduced to this brand new culture and kind of a brand new lifestyle, sometimes a brand new way of thinking, and things become a bit more complicated for the parents. They do, because again, speaking of assimilation, when you are in a small town or in a village or somewhere in your country where everyone just kind of agrees with a certain lifestyle and everyone has just kind of collectively accepted certain life rules to be the right rules or whatever, no one really complains. And if you want to complain, you do it quietly. You don't cause much of a fuss, if that makes sense. When you move to another country like the United States, well, you start getting an education, perhaps, you start meeting new people. Whether you notice it or not, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7 years down the line, something within you is changing, and I think it changes forever. And then I think that when you go back to your country and you visit your country, you try to match that new feeling with that feeling that you had before you moved to this new place and got to know this new place. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to say they're not compatible, but in a sense, they're not compatible because it's really hard to match them. You are just a completely new person. And again, I'm almost 39. I've lived in the United States for such a long time. I've lived in Sweden for a very long time. I was born in Montenegro. Honestly, I don't know where home is. Okay, if I
Mm-hmm.
told you anything else, I'd be lying. I feel like I have like
Mm-hmm.
5 feet in different places. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I'm saying? And I noticed that the older you get, the more nostalgic you become about certain things. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, and just to piggyback, and I'm sure you just didn't um, say this, but I'll say it for you. The voyage of an immigrant, someone who is leaving either on foot, boat, airplane, whatever, however you get here, it's a courageous decision, maybe the most courageous decision you will make. And I think about, just to echo what you were saying, Sam, is that um, I used to think of myself as an immigrant to this country, not in the sense of one country to another, but from one existence. So prison was like another world, and the transitioning part, I mention it with my father's story because I think it's very vital. It's a deal breaker or a launching pad to success. So when someone leaves incarceration and they're released under whatever circumstances, you were found innocent or you served your time, and you're leaving one world and entering another. Culturally, the dynamics, the mystery, the fear, all that stuff is the same. And then you arrive, and the complexities of assimilating or transitioning from one world to the other needs to be more needs to be um, I think it needs to have more sensitivity associated with it and importance is attached to it. The same way someone coming from Montenegro or Spain or Mexico or El Salvador or Brazil, whatever, you get here and it's not like, oh, I'm here to celebrate, let's go to the wherever. It's coronavirus right now, but before COVID, you can do
Right,
stuff.
right.
But you wanna, and you should celebrate your victory. You should celebrate that you've arrived. But the mistake shouldn't be, I'm here. That's all that matters. There has to be this work that you do to make sure that you are not only aware where the beach is, but also where the college is and where you can get resources on how to be the best that you can be.
I mean, 100%. 100% I agree with that, because I am a firm believer that yes, for sure, we can sit here now and analyze our lives and look back at all the things that went wrong and all the things that were good. And we might come to the conclusion, damn it, I wasn't dealt a good card, like why did that happen to me? Why did this have to happen to me? Sometimes when I look back on my teenager years or my childhood, I'm not going to lie, I feel like I missed out on a lot of that, which comes with being very young,
Mm.
crazy, making mistakes, all of that. Sure, sometimes there is that sentiment, but I think if you get stuck in that way of thinking, then I can come up with 100 different things that could have been better, that, I wish my parents understood me a little better when I was a teenager. Again, speaking of that cultural difference, being the oldest kid, having to grow up all of a sudden in this super liberal, super open country where my parents didn't even know anyone, didn't even know the language, didn't understand the culture. You know what I'm saying? So it's okay for us to reflect on our lives and say, well, you know what, damn it, that wasn't right, that wasn't fair, but at the end of the day, I am a crazy believer that no matter what, I have to pick up whatever I have and try to do the best that I can with what I have. That's what I believe. We can
I
agree to
agree.
disagree. People can have different opinions. That's totally fine. Okay. I just believe it's super, super important. And yes, when we reflect on our lives, sometimes it's like, man, why do I have to do so much extra work? Look at all these other kids, and they don't even care half as much as I care about this. For example, I'm
Hmm.
just giving an example. Okay, since we both went to the same university, I don't know if you ever experienced this, but I experienced this a few times at LMU where I was like, you know, oh my God, this school is amazing. Like, imagine, imagine not having to work. Like, imagine just going to the library after your class, have some lunch, relax, and just dive in. Do your homework, do it in a relaxed way. I cannot tell you how many times I fell asleep, okay, at the library, or left the library at 4 in the morning because I was there studying, trying, because I had like 2 3 other jobs on the side, and not to be
Yeah.
dramatic, like, oh, 2 3 other jobs, but I was
No,
a
I
research
remember.
assistant, a tutor, I was babysitting, so there were jobs, there were commitments that I had to make it to, and so I think, there were moments where I would just kind of look around and I'd be like, oh my gosh, look at these clueless kids around me. They have no idea how blessed they are. And it's okay to have those moments, but my thing is, snap the hell out of that moment.
Hmm.
Don't go
Hmm.
there because it's not their fault.
Right.
Their parents probably worked really, really hard to give them that life. And so now they have it. And they may not know everything that I know. That's fine. They're going to learn in their own time. You understand what I'm trying to say,
I
So
do.
it's like, I agree with you 100%. I don't think it's ever about like, okay, I'm here and that's good enough. No, I'm here. What's here for me? Like, take a look
Hmm.
around. How can I improve my life circumstances? And God knows there are some extremely difficult life circumstances that I have no right to even talk about, to be honest with you, but
Mm.
just as a reflection,
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No. I'll add one lesson I learned about life, and I learned this in prison that ties in with what we're talking about here, and then we can move on to something else. But if you don't,
no
if it's
worries,
okay,
man. No worries. I like
you
our
know, I love it as well. I remember in this fishbowl that I was living in, a prison yard, this microcosm of society, and I remember seeing behavioral patterns in people, other men who were there with me, obviously, or staff who worked there. And I noticed, and also from my readings, really is where it came from, that if someone has a purpose in their step, they have a direction, they know where they're going. Maybe they don't even know where it is, but they're moving in that direction. People want to help you. You attract the attention or the assistance if others are watching you, you have purpose in your step. You're moving in the direction of your goal. People can just feel that. People can just sense that maybe they want to cheer you on, or they want to applaud you in whichever way, or they want to guide you or give you a glass of water, whatever example. And I think that when you mentioned our classmates, I was a 37-year-old freshman at a university where normally you're 17, 18 years old
Right.
as a new arrival. So my
Been
new
there, done
arrival,
that. Been there, done
you know,
that.
which is I look back at my so do you. We're just talking about it at our time at the university at LMU. And there's funny moments where people think I'm the professor. There's moments where I feel like, what am I doing here? Like I'm the dad's age. Like this is like they're looking at me like I'm the dad. Like their fathers are probably younger than me or whatever.
Mhm.
But the reality is that, and the coursework is almost designed for someone who is 18, 19, 20. But what was beautiful about you and I being there as young adults, I'll leave it there.
Ooh.
Um,
As young adults, guys. Please, young
is
adults. Very
is that
important words
yeah,
here,
yeah, yeah.
okay? Homework for next time. Young adults.
That's very loosely. It's the gray area, like my beard. Is that I think that we're able to, like what you're describing, we're able to, our palette for life or for knowledge might be a little more sophisticated, and we might be able to appreciate the lesson and find and know maybe how to apply it. I think one of the things that I have that I'm very aware of is, if you want to be a teacher, and I love your style, Sam, but if you want to be a teacher, you also have to give the student an example. And so this is like the example of what you're describing. You can teach people about a language. You can tell them the appropriate way of using their what they've learned, and then you give an example like we're doing here about how it's applied. And I think sometimes the students leave the university thinking, "Oh man, now what? What what do I do with what I just learned, or partly learned, or maybe I should have learned?" But I think it also goes back to the individual. That's you are being, um, the way I like to look at it is that the university was the professors were just throwing seeds like a farmer with knowledge, and hoping that the children will absorb it, nurture the soil and the seed, and it would grow and blossom, obviously, right? But anyway, it was a great experience. I'm happy that we did it. We
Well,
survived it.
it was, to me, it was an amazing experience, and you know what it felt like for me, man? I'll be
Mm,
honest with you.
mm,
So for the longest time, when I moved to Los Angeles, for the longest time I wasn't driving. So I was taking the bus everywhere. Sometimes two or three buses on the same day, more than that sometimes. So I was taking the bus everywhere. And this fear of learning how to drive kind of followed me for a while, because the streets of LA looked really scary to me. It's like, oh God, I don't want to get in a car. I don't want to drive in the city, right? So okay, 7 years later, you're like, all right, well, I need to learn how to drive because I can't be taking these buses everywhere. And also you start to feel really limited. It's like, oh my gosh, I gotta rush. The last bus is going now, or whatever. Whereas you have your car, you can just do whatever you want to do, whatever. So the way it feels for me is like this. When I started to drive, I bought a car for like $1,000. Okay, to be honest, and not to be ungrateful to that car, it was kind of a piece of shit car. But to me, it was like the most incredible car
mm,
I've ever had in my life, because it took me places. I was able to
mm,
drive to school. So I drove it for a little while, and then it broke down, like in the middle of the street. It just broke down. Okay, fine. Get rid of that car, get another piece of shit car, okay? So then you're like, all right, it's a car. I'm driving and I'm doing my thing. And then one day, someone stole that car. So I went to the parking lot, and I'm like, what happens? Like, immediately you start to question yourself. You're like, oh, no, 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 wait a minute. I just forgot. Like, I must have parked somewhere else, But then I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure I parked here. And then you're like, God, did I park somewhere else? No, I parked here. And then you realize, oh, shoot, someone stole my car. So then I
Mm.
was without a car for a couple of months or so until they found this car again, called me, and then I got this car back again so I could drive it for a little while again. And I was super grateful to have it back. But then what happened? The same exact thing happened again. The car broke down, left me stranded in the middle of the street. Except
Mm.
this time I was like, you know what? I've had it with piece of shit cars. It's time to buy a real car. Okay. So I went to a couple of different car dealerships and I finally settled for a nice new car. The reason
Mm.
why I'm giving you this kind of story of all my cars or whatever is when I was accepted to LMU, I had the same exact feeling like every other day that I still have with my car. I still have maybe once a week or every other week that feeling like, damn, my car is nice. I love my car. I can't believe I have this car. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's not even the nicest car in the world. It's just that I appreciate it so much. It means the world to me that I was able to do that for myself. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, did I appreciate it on LMU? Hell yeah, I did. I had moments often when I was walking around and I'm like, oh my God, am I going to graduate from this school? Like, this is where I'm going? How did I end up here? You know,
Yeah.
a little girl from a village. You know what I'm saying? So I appreciated the hell out of it. I really
Mm-hmm.
did, you know? Now, if I could wish that things were a little bit different, I wish the crowd would have been a little bit more diverse,
Mm-hmm.
a little bit more people with different backgrounds, maybe a bit more of a story to tell or whatever. Sure, but other than that, it was unbelievable. And I don't think it's a coincidence that I became friends with you. I became friends with this other guy, Pedro from Cuba, who was an older guy, this older lady from France. I mean, we kind of gravitated towards each other
Yeah.
because I think of our backgrounds, like we were a little bit on a different level. I think a little bit, with life experience and stuff like that, I think.
And I'd like to believe that our presence in the classrooms that we attended were enriching and helpful for the professor. Not that they had another professor there with them, but to have someone in the room who has some life experience, or maybe who has another point of view that it has more that is more enriched with just life experience. If anything else, I can tell you that I echo your sentiments about the university and the life there. It's for me, because of my story with my incarceration,
Right.
and it has almost like a religious or spiritual undertone, but I felt that physically and spiritually I had been tested and I won. I had been thrown into this deep pit, and for 20 years, and the social experiment was, let's see if he can survive that. With all the variables, let's see what happens. And lo and behold, I reappear, right? I'm back 20 years later. But on a personal level, I had always wanted to go to school. I knew the value of education, obviously, when I was in prison. The people who came to my rescue, these lawyers, were educated, or everyone was a lawyer or some sort of well, they were all lawyers, but they weren't only educated, but they had the right heart condition. And so there was examples of what I should do as well. And so when the opportunity came for me to go to school, I did, and thankfully I got into LMU. But I'll tell you that I felt that there was this testing going on. I felt smart. I felt that I had acquired um, um, wisdom, intelligence, understanding. But you want to refine that, And even though I was almost 40 years old, I was 37 when I became a freshman. I on some level I was still 18, you
Right.
know,
Right.
and that was okay. I was okay with that. I was okay, and there was times when I would see someone walking down the whatever building or through the campus, and I would look at them, and they were 19 years old. I'm assuming they were 19, and they looked like me. It was a young Latino who resembled me, and I would almost break down on the spot,
Mm,
thinking, man, that could have been me. That could have, like, just trying to imagine what a life that wouldn't have been interrupted, what it might have looked like, and
So, so obviously you were dealt this unimaginable injustice. You are this young kid who suddenly is told, well, you've committed this and this crime and you're going to prison. How does, like, how, what goes into, like, what goes on inside of your head at that moment? Like, how does one ever prepare to survive something like that? And I just want to be clear, and I want to repeat this again. Whenever it comes to you and talking to you, I have a million questions about that time. But I always remind myself not to be selfish with those questions, because I'm sure there are moments that you don't want to relive by talking about it. And so that's why I'm letting you talk about whatever you want to talk about, whatever you want, feel comfortable talking about. I
well,
don't want to pressure too many
yeah.
questions, really,
Well,
Frankie.
thank no, but thank you for being uh, sensitive to that. But just know that I'm an open book. So whatever you want to know, we can definitely cover it. If you want to talk about prison food or whatever you want to talk about,
So,
But
so
but back
how do you,
but to you,
yeah, how do you prepare for that? What the hell? Like, what happens in that moment, you know?
you don't prepare. You don't prepare. You almost default to what I discovered about humanity or humans very very early on is that we are designed, all of us, every human being is designed to adjust to their or assimilate to their environment or the circumstances. If it's weather, if it's pain, happiness, we know how to adjust, and in this case, it was a combination of a few things. It was an intersection of disbelief, like what is going on here? Why am I here? I don't belong here. Literally, do not belong here. This is where people are sent when they have committed a crime and they're being punished. Um, there is the part of me just maturing. I was a boy, and then I'm now 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and I can feel my my almost like the chemicals in my brain, like just like releasing. I was becoming a different person, just, and it's interesting to think about it that way. I think in society we're so busy with the things that how we feel our lives that we miss these moments of graduating from one stage of your life to another.
Mm,
You don't even Sometimes you don't even realize, oh, I'm 25 now. I'm 30. What happened?
mm,
But when your life is a trickle, your life is so unfolding so slowly. You notice these things. And so, as to the question about how do you prepare for that, I think you just hold on. There's no other way but to hold on. And I'm not embarrassed to say this, but I think fear definitely helped me.
Fear?
And
Fear helped you?
fear,
Hmm.
yeah. So I'll tell you why. I think for
Okay.
many men and people, I shouldn't just make it a gender thing here, but I will keep it with the men. There are many guys that I know who will never admit that they were afraid. I don't get afraid. That is not something that I can experience, fear. And, very tough guys, whatever, right? But I'll tell you that fear, a disguised fear. So I was afraid on the inside, but on the outside, I was making it seem like I was cool. But the fear of the unknown kept me alert. It kept me vigilant of my surroundings. It kept me hungry to want to get out. It kept me from being satisfied with this new circumstance of my life, you know. And I'll tell you that I commend those natural emotions that I was able to tap into them and say, you know, I wasn't walking around telling people I was afraid, but I think the fear of maybe dying in prison or the fear of being stuck in there motivated me to educate myself in prison, to advocate for myself, and to ultimately attract the people that I needed to help free me. But I think to the core question, to your initial question, it's, you know, it's you know, it's there's no preparation for it, I would say.
Maybe we could tie in this question coming from a student. His name is Yasser, and he's from Turkey. And his question for you is, what got you going and what motivated you to not give up while you were doing time? So I think it's connected to...
You know, and I'll tie the response to my trip to Istanbul when I went to Turkey. So when my wife and I went there, there was a big plaza near the hotel we were staying in for a few days. And one of the nights that we arrived, we went to this plaza, and there was protesters, you know, with these big flags, anti-government folks, and very closely there was the government, all the soldiers and the tanks. It was like a showdown that we weren't sure if we should witness it or we should leave. And so luckily nothing happened that night. But I'll tell you that I say that to tell you that what motivated me was this constant pressure that in prison, from the guards, from the administration, from other prisoners, of dictating your every second of your life. As how I felt that in Istanbul, the pressure of how you should conform to the wills of the government were also at a standstill on that plaza. And I think that when you have a free soul, you can be in prison, but you know what freedom feels like, and you don't like it. You don't like it. You allow those things to fuel you. You allow these things that are happening around you to be the things that motivate you. And for me, I used a very unusual motivation, which was, you know, when someone tells you when you have to go to sleep, what you can eat, how you should, you know, you can't have a beard in prison when I was there. So how you have, what kind of facial features, how you want to groom yourself. And so that's just one example of what kept me going. On the flip side, that's sort of what fueled me. But on the flip side, as a child, I wasn't an avid, you know, reader, or, you know, I wasn't into maybe doing my homework, you know. But and when I was in prison, I definitely became an avid reader, slowly but surely. I loved to communicate. I loved to write, so I would write a lot. I worked out. You know, there's things that kind of keep you active and busy. But I think ultimately is to use your surrounding, whatever it is, to either inspire you or to fuel your dreams or fuel your passions. And in this case, it's a very weird thing to say, oh, the guards were the ones who were, you know, motivating me. But the motivation was I didn't want that anymore. I didn't need someone to keep telling me how I should live my life. And so that motivated me to get out, you know.
If I may ask this question that just kind of popped in my head right now, whenever I watch movies that are somehow related to someone being in prison or jail or whatever, you know,
Right.
Usually the guards they're just portrayed as very, very scary, very not friendly at all. You know, they're there to kind of make your life a living hell almost, you know. Was it like that for you too when you were in prison, or were there some guards that were like, I don't know, human, that you guys could, I don't know, talk to, not necessarily befriend, but that didn't have that, military, like, I'm gonna make your life a living hell type of thing. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I think, Sam, like in life, there's a combination of the good cop and the bad cop, and there were some officers who were there to, who knows why they were there, but they were not there to be, there were some guards there to make your life a living hell, obviously. And there were some who were just there to work and go home to their families and weren't trying to get involved in the prison drama. And my example is more about that one guard who was always nagging and reminding you that you are nothing and that, you belong here. That's a very cold-blooded type of way of living. But there were many other guards who I interacted with who were great people, and some I got to know very, very well. Different parts of my incarceration. But the truth is that they make it very clear to you when you arrive to any prison is that you are the prisoner and they are the free staff. They are the people who are free, and you are not supposed to interact with them. And I'm sure they get the same story from their administration. Don't befriend the prisoners, and the prisoners don't befriend the staff. But obviously, people have hearts and are very respectful. And I can think of a guy right now in Folsom. I can't recall his name, but it was an older gentleman who was very, very polite to not only me but to everyone. And when somebody in a power of authority can display compassion or just simple respect, oh my God, it goes a long way.
There's something so damn powerful about that, when someone has the power to be a total jerk, but chooses to be the opposite of that. It's incredible. I just randomly came across this documentary on Netflix. It's called Last Chance U. And so, in a nutshell, it focuses on these football players who are very talented guys, but who come from kind of broken backgrounds. And at some point in their lives, they all had a really good opportunity to make it in football, and somehow something went wrong. Maybe they committed a crime or whatever, so they're basically brought to this college, and it's kind of like their last chance to make things right, and man, I don't know anything about football. If you put a gun to my head, I don't know what the hell is going on when they play or anything like that. Really, I don't,
Right.
But man, this show has sucked me in, It's like such a good documentary, and I'm sharing it because you see in this show there are those coaches, like you said, that have that power, that have that authority, but they're choosing it very wisely. And you notice that they make such a much greater impact on these kids rather than someone who is just like abusing their authority and nothing comes out of it. You're basically quiet because you have to be, not because you want to be, not because you respect the person. But there's something really powerful, really, really powerful about that. Now, there's another question here for you from Christian from Argentina, who says, how did you deal with the feeling of anger, knowing that you were blamed for a crime that you did not commit?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's interesting that people gravitate towards anger of the spectrum of emotions that we can come up with: sadness, depression, attempts of suicide. It goes on and on, right? But I think anger fits this storyline, and I think the anger came not necessarily. Anger didn't arise from my arrest. Anger came from feeling that the people who were hired and had the authority, going back to the authority, to do the right thing. If it was the lawyers, the law enforcement, the jurors, you know, the critical players in my story, the anger came from these people deciding that I had no value and that they can discard my life and take this process with make it insignificant, not pay the attention that they should, or not investigate as they should have, and so on. And so I think the anger is from believing as a child and in adults, you know, back to how you were instilled these values about respect adults. If you're in trouble, go to an adult figure or someone of authority, a fireman, an officer, a teacher. And when those early beliefs are the ones that you're holding on to, and are the ones that are to some degree not lived up to by other people, that's what angered me. It angered me, but it also motivated me. But I'll stick with the angered part for a sec. The anger, it didn't last long, and thankfully it didn't last long, because I think what happens with anger or those type of emotions, if you fester or they fester in you for too long, they can really contaminate all the areas of your life. I'll tell you a story of a guy who was with me. So back to Folsom Prison. His name was Cowboy. That was his nickname. He was older than me, and we lived in the same tier. So we're like in the same hallway in this prison cell block. And we would eat, go to dinner together, and sometimes we would exercise together. And you know, he was like my neighbor from my cell on the cell block. And I thought he was okay, you know, just another guy who I met. But then I realized that Cowboy was a very angry man. He was like in maybe early 50s, and it started like this way. You know, one day he just randomly told me that he hated his wife, his ex-wife. And he was angry with her because she stopped writing him letters and visiting him. I said, okay, you know, that's a good reason to be angry, man. I get it, you know. And then the next day he was angry at his lawyer, and then the judge, and then he was angry about the food that we were having for dinner. And then I noticed that he was angry about the weather. And then I noticed that he would just sometimes be angry at me. And I said, wow, what a lesson. What a lesson this man's teaching me without even being aware that he's teaching me. And I tell you that story, Sam, because Cowboy taught me a valuable lesson about holding on to anger and assigning anger to people and creating these problems in your life. And I realized that if I was ever going to be free, I couldn't be angry with the lawyer. I couldn't be angry with the witness who testified against me wrongfully. And I needed to just take the high road and say, you know, let me do something with that anger, and then it motivate me to want to get out, and not for vengeance, but just to get out and live a good life, you know. And so I get angry. Sometimes I get angry at my kids, you know, when they make a mess, you know. So angry is a natural emotion.
But I mean, at the same time, I'm listening to that story, and a lot of self-awareness is there, you know, like it sounds like you're very self-aware of these thoughts and these things. And I think in order for you to be able to sit there and say, oh, wow, that guy, as annoying as he may be right now, is actually teaching me a lesson. I think a great deal of self-awareness is needed for that. How did you get to that point? I mean, did you read some, I don't know, spiritual books or self-help books? Or, I mean, how do you reach that point? Because I think some work is needed to be done in order for us to get there, no? As humans, you don't think?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And I say, accept that as a compliment. I think, Sam, that I think that if you are living your life in the moment, and it's people refer to that like live in the moment, um, or try to live in the moment. They say try to because it seems to be such a difficult thing. But I'll tell you that I can recall as a young boy, and even to this very day, um, I felt that I was very alert of my environment. I really wanted to be aware of what was going on around me. I've heard of the word aloof. Aloof is like someone who is there but is not really there. You might be a friend at a party, and they say, "Hey, come on, man, let's." And he's like, like what's going on?" And no drugs involved. He's just like, not really. His tuning is not right where it should be. And then and there's someone like me who is maybe hyper vigilant to their surroundings, who is really taking in, the whole room, just really paying attention. And to go beyond that, I think is what I love. I love that I found this. I love that I found the way to ignite my imagination and to see something and to be able to make a story out of it, or for it to affect me, and use my imagination, if that's the bridge to get there. That's the short answer. The long answer, I guess you have to wait for my book. I'm going to write a book about my life, and I hope to give a better understanding of that process. But I will tell you that I have many stories and many memories of that. And I'll give you one brief one because it ties in with the teacher, and you're a teacher, and I think this helps. When I was in the third grade, I was in an elementary school here in Los Angeles, in Linwood, California. And my third grade teacher, Mrs. Taxter, who's a good friend of mine to this day, she's now retired. She affected my life in ways I would have never imagined. And so as a young boy, I was an artist. I loved to doodle and draw. And she took a liking to me. I remember she would call me over to her desk and just ask me questions, or she would encourage my drawings, motivate me to draw more and more. And one day, a new student showed up to class, and who in the third grade, he was an amazing artist. So if I thought I was okay, this guy was amazing at just in the third grade. And I remember she must have noticed that I was really like down about that. And she gave me a little speech about like, it's not about the end process. It's about the process. It's not about the final drawing. It's about like having an idea, getting the pencils, getting the paper, and drawing, and your shadows and whatever you're shading. The fact that I can remember that story that happened over 30 years ago, this little conversation, speaks to my point. I didn't remember that until I was in prison. I had it when I was in third grade, and I didn't remember that until I was 25, 30 years old. I remember my teacher motivating me this way. And I used this very insignificant conversation with my teacher I applied that to my real life in prison, because I thought about this little step-by-step process she was reminding me of. You have a vision of what you want. Then you get the tools. You get your pencils or your crayons or your paper, and then you begin to work. And I'll tell you, Sam, as stupid as it might sound, I needed to remember someone telling me that. I needed deep in my conscious, in my memory bank, I remember this little conversation about a woman who was a stranger to me, just my teacher, giving me the game plan of life, which is, and I'll repeat it again, you have to have this idea of what you want to draw, this idea of what you want. You find the tools of what you need, and then you do the work. And I thought, as a guy who was wrongfully imprisoned, what I wanted was freedom. And the tools that I needed were these lawyers. And the work was holding on tight, like I did from the very beginning, and hoping for the best. And lo and behold, it happened, you know. I'm not sure what you call that, if it's spiritual or what, but I think it's
Well,
pretty cool.
well, I mean, it's definitely a heightened sense of awareness, because I cannot, because I'm thinking about what you said earlier as well, like walking into the room and reading the room, checking out everything that's in the room. There's something really good about that. In your case, I think you are aware, you know. Then there's this other side where sometimes we check the room and there's a chance of us being judgmental towards someone, you know, looking at something and making up our mind, oh yeah, this is how it must be, or maybe this is how it is. But the truth is, we don't really know.
Mm-hmm.
I also love what your teacher said. It's like, do you have the vision? Now look for the tools, right? But also, to add to that, many times in life we have the vision, we get the tools, and then that vision doesn't necessarily turn out exactly how we envisioned it, you know?
But,
And that,
and that's the problem. I have to say that's the problem.
in which
So
sense? In which sense?
here's my another life lesson that I learned. I'm sure it doesn't apply to everyone, but it applied to me. I learned, Sam, that if you get too busy worrying about the details of your vision, of your idea, it'll never come true. It'll never come true. You want to instead focus on the emotion you're going to receive when even something close to what you want appears, and get excited about that. Because if you start getting into, well, I want this car. You talked about cars earlier. We'll keep it with that vision. The car, when I get older, the car that I want has to be blue. It has to have brown leather seats. It has to have the sound system that is, the most modern, and the engine has to be fast, right? And lo and behold, at some point, there's the blue car, but it has red interior. And on some level, you're like, that's not what I wanted. That's not. I didn't want the girl with the blonde hair. I wanted her with the black hair. Like, that's not. But the
Right.
blonde one, it's like it's more about like it's less about the interior,
Mm-hmm.
Well, in this case, it's more about the interior, less about the exterior. If you're looking for a partner or whatever, like it's, and I think that I learned how to meditate when I was in prison, and I also learned how to pray when I was in prison. I checked the Catholic box. As a child, my parents, we didn't really go to mass too often, but I'm Catholic, and I knew nothing of God. I knew nothing about the practices of the religion or any religion to go that far. But I remember thinking about what people pray for, and how easy it is to pray for something when you're in need, and then the fear goes away, and you forgot what you prayed for. You completely forgot you even made a prayer. There was a prayer to the universe, to God, or whatever. And when I was in prison, I felt that whoever your God was, he was like a short line cook, which I would envision a small restaurant, and they had a big circle like for you put the ticket, like the order, and they spin it, and then the cook gets a sticker, the little paper, and he reads it. Okay, he wants eggs or he wants whatever. I felt that there was a huge circle that you put your prayer in it, and who knows when it was going to get around to cooking your order, And I felt that people would either leave, forget that they even made an order, they made a prayer, and or just were not willing to wait for it. And I think that for me, people say, why did it take you 20 years? You know, why does, you know, if they use it like in a spiritual language, you know, why did it take 20 years for God to answer your prayers is what people have asked me. And I say, you know, I don't know, but I know for my part, I had to be patient with whenever it was. If that's God or the courts or the judges or the lawyers, you know, I had no control about that part. But what I did have control over is remembering what my desire was, and my desire was freedom, and luckily for me, I got it.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why I asked you earlier, how did you get to that point? Because it really, your attitude and your outlook on all these very, very challenging things, I cannot even imagine seriously what that must have felt like, you know? Uh, it sounded very spiritual to me, you know? It reminded me of these, you know, meditation books and self-help books, which
Right.
very often talk about exactly what you touched upon earlier, you know, don't hold on to grudges, don't plant, you know, that seed of anger that just keeps growing and growing, and then you are giving it out to everybody else in your life. And although it sounds amazing, you know, I think we can both agree that all those things are very challenging for human beings, you know. So I just kind of, I'm like a little bit in awe, to be honest with you. It's like, wow, you know, how do you stay patient for such a long time? You know, how do you
Yeah,
not lose your mind? Honestly, how do you
yeah.
not lose your mind? And I don't know if you remember, but yeah, I don't know if you also know Jan Shirley. Did I?
I do know Jan. Yeah,
Yeah, Jan Shirley.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I was doing some work with her years ago at juvie, you know. And although you can't exactly compare a juvie to an actual, you know, prison with a serious sentence, right? I think that idea of passing through all these gates, you know, in order to get to
Mm,
these kids. I swear to God, every Sunday, every single Sunday, I had that feeling when we were done with our visits and everything. And I was like, wow, I get to leave. I get to go.
mm,
And that was always like, hell yeah, you know, like I get to leave this place, you know. So then to stop and think just from a realistic perspective, like, oh my God, like, how do you stay that strong? How do you stay that patient after all those years? And I said this last time we had our live on Instagram. I'm going to say it again. You know, if I had just met you on a bus and I knew nothing about your story, I would have never, ever guessed what you have been through. You know, I
mm,
think to this day, if I just met you, you say you're a complete stranger, I don't know anything about you, I would have never in my wildest dreams imagined or guessed what you have gone through. And I think with some people, you feel the heaviness, you know, you feel,
mm,
like you said, you feel the anger, you feel kind of the energy, for lack of better terms. I don't know exactly what to call it. So I'm like in awe, you know, and I'm like, oh my God, how is it possible? Like how do we reach that? Do you think that all human beings have that possible, I mean, have that potential to get to that level of patience and that level of acceptance that you did? Or do you think it's just, I don't know, it's a mental game, you know, it's something that individually we have to work on? Like what's the
mm.
secret, man, you know?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I don't want to, you know, take it to a point of, you know, oh my God, like I hold the secrets of enduring such tragedies and pain. I'm obviously not the only one who's ever experienced tragedy. We've all experienced it to one degree or the other. But I'll tell you this then. Um, my father, my father taught me a lesson, and he taught me a lesson he was not intending to teach me as a young boy. When my father and mother divorced, and you know, people divorce all the time, so divorce happens. But when my father, my mother divorced, my father fell into like a deep depression. He was broken. His identity that his wife left him was bruised, I suppose. He never remarried. He never dated. And I remember as a boy, I might have been 10, 11. This happened when I was 9, but maybe some years later, I remember, and I say it with embarrassment because I honor my father, but I'll still say it. I remember looking at my father and saying, I will never allow a life experience like this. This is just an experience in your life to own me, to allow me to just win. And going back to like the teacher, there's like these little moments that you remember. At some point in my incarceration, I was mining my story, like a gold miner. I was, just remembering with the pickaxe or whatever. And I remember thinking of what I just told you right now. And I realized that I had become a person that was just very optimistic. I've always been very optimistic. I know that from a very young age. I know that as an adult, it's just who I am. I tend to either see the bright side in something, or I'm also very sarcastic. I haven't been funny or sarcastic on your show, but I can also be very funny. And I tend to see things in a funny manner. I try to, not to laugh at something, but I don't. My first reaction is not to panic, and so when you are wired this way, and you are in a very complicated situation that makes you completely powerless. There is no one who cares about what you have to say. You are no one, and you can offer nothing, and no one cares about you. So just sit there in your prison cell, and for me, I didn't want to play along with that. I didn't want to surrender to that. And so then I fought back. I fought, and I ultimately won. But I think of patience as being a virtue, and being something that it's hard to wait. Waiting is what I had to do. I had to wait for a long time. And I'll tell you this before we move on. I looked at my waiting, not only waiting, but also carrying weight that wasn't mine to carry. This pain, or this punishment that wasn't mine. And I look at it very primitive, just a man with no shirt carrying a big sack of rocks. And I couldn't separate myself from that when I was in prison. But I learned how to carry it. I learned how to hold it over my shoulder. I learned how to, before I would carry it in front of me, and start in my back, and then life teaches you how to carry. So it's less about the weight; it's more about how you hold it. And so lo and behold, I endured that, but I obviously didn't do it alone. People. I feel the good way of me describing it is that I feel like I was on this long journey, and most of the time there was someone there walking with me in spirit, either by writing me letters or visiting me, or maybe a phone call. And then there was times I was completely alone, because even a close friend or a relative, they're living their lives on the outside. They can't be trying to send you a letter every day or whatever. So, and I understand that. So I never was held anyone, made anyone feel bad about that. But it's a lonely life as well. It's very lonely.
I wonder also how much a sense of that, I don't know, Mexican spirit played, what part it played, because as an outsider, as someone who isn't, I'm not from Mexico or anything like that. I actually, just
love the Mexican culture, right?
just like, it's not even, to be honest with you, it's not even in love with the Mexican culture, but there's something about this culture that I'm very impressed with, and I cannot speak for every single Mexican out there. I can only speak for the majority, so the Latinos that I have met thus far in Los
Mm-hmm.
Angeles during my time here in the United States, majority of them being Mexican, there's this spirit, man. There's this spirit of gratitude, hard work, and I've seen people go through really difficult situations. And I really cannot remember one situation where I saw someone bitter towards someone else, or angry towards someone else. So it has left a very beautiful impression on me, that this culture is based on extremely hardworking people, very helpful people. There's that sense
Mm-hmm.
of community. You are always welcome. I've never been viewed as a stranger. I've never been viewed as a stranger, even though, like you said, there's an ocean between our cultures. I mean, between our countries. Not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily our cultures. There are many similarities in our cultures,
Right.
but there's this, I don't know, this Mexican spirit, man, and it's funny because my dad shared this with me a while ago, how he had watched this, like, I don't know, TV show about some guy who had like traveled to all these different countries around the world. And apparently that guy said that traveling to Mexico was like his best experience. And he was like, the people of Mexico, there's something so special about these people.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't have been able to talk about it until I met a bunch of Mexicans myself. And I've lived with Mexicans. So many Mexicans have like taken me into their homes like a family member. I'll never forget when I was a college student. There was a family, I was tutoring their kids, and that's how I was introduced to them. And I ended up staying with them for like 6 months. And I kid you not, like, their kids slept in the room with them so I could have my own room. Like that, I was so embarrassed. I was like, oh my God, no, please. No, mija, no. And then every morning, these kids would come in the room and like kiss me on the cheek and like, bye,
Mm-hmm.
Samra, see you later. Like, amazing, man, amazing. I'm not trying to now idealize Mexican people and everyone's perfect, but I've had an incredible experience. And even now where I live, my Mexican neighbors are so fantastic. Like, they're so freaking amazing. Like, if I park my car on the wrong side, they never let me get a ticket. Never. They'll like knock on my door like early in the Vecina, apúrate, por favor, la tiquetera. And I'm like, oh my God, dude, I love Mexicans, man. I just love
Yeah.
Mexicans.
Yeah. So do I.
I
So do I.
swear, there's something about the culture. I don't know.
I don't. That's it's such a. Thank you for the compliment, and I'm gonna accept that for myself and my people here. But I think there's a magic there that I hate the rhetoric of like people putting down if it's Trump or other people putting down my people. I feel very very connected to my Mexican roots, and it's a complicated thing where now we're moving to Latinos and Latinas, and no longer can you say you're Mexican or Chicano. And I start off by saying that my origins are Mexican, so I'm proud of that. But I'll tell you that there is other lessons from other cultures that um, that I have to give credit to,
Mm,
and I can give credit to my people as well. But I'm going to hold off for a minute. I'll give credit to the African American culture.
mm,
When I was in prison, Sambra, and as I mentioned before, you are in the blacks are over there, the whites are over there, the Mexicans over there, the others, and everyone has their group. And policy, if there was an incident amongst the Mexicans, they put all the Mexicans and they lock them up. And all of them gladly and without questioning the system and why, they just go and they go and lock up because everyone's moving as a group. And so I am. So I'm going to my cell too. I'm going to just, I don't know what happened. I don't know why I'm getting this extra punishment, but I'll find out later. And then I noticed that the blacks, and I'll refer to them as the blacks, how they were in prison. Everyone has their color. When they said, hey, all blacks, go to your cell, you're on lockdown. 80% of them would say, fuck that. I'm like, for what? I didn't do nothing. Why are you locking me down for? And they want to talk to the warden, and they want to talk to the captain, and they want to protest right there, right? Not an official protest, but they raise their voice.
I got it.
And I said, and you know what? This happened. I learned this lesson in prison. And I said, oh man, I need to be more like a black man for my problem. And I hate to assign that specific element to them, but I give them praise for this because they taught me that sometimes the culture war has their unique languages. And the lesson that I learned was that, because what I was doing was very submissive, or very polite, very whatever. But I needed to ramp that up. I needed to embody and use that example as something that I needed to do as well. And I'll tell you, and I could give the Asians a credit as well, or the Jews, or other groups that were there. But specifically in a situation where you're wrongfully convicted, and you see someone who's been wrongfully treated, and they say, no, right away. They don't wait 6 months. They were like immediately doing that. Was such a beautiful thing. And things have changed now, and things are, that was just one example of many that I could have given you. There's been times where, my group as well protested on a number of things that changed the entire system. So, but I think that there are these cultural differences that might be different because of the way you look or the way you speak. But there's other things that are behind the scenes that we can use from one another in exchange to make us to bring us together, and to also make us better people.
Sure. And I also think that goes back to what we talked about earlier, having a bit of a rough life, and learning to speak up for yourself and learning to stand up for yourself, and so again, you might look at it from the perspective of, oh, damn it, I was dealt this card and that sucks. But then at the end of the day, that unfair card taught you something priceless, that maybe this person who was dealt all the right cards doesn't really possess that and doesn't exactly know how to use it or whatever. Obviously at the end of the day, we're human beings. We all come from different backgrounds. We all have our own stories to tell, for sure. But I think it's just kind of creepy that you mentioned this, actually, because last night, I swear to God, I was having a conversation again in reference to this documentary, because any free time that I have, I'm like glued to the TV watching this documentary. I don't care about football, dude. I couldn't care less about it. But the stories, I swear to God, like, they make you want to wake up 5 a.m. and like, hell yeah, I'm gonna do even better. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, there's something motivational about it. But the people that stood out for me the most in that documentary are these strong Black mothers, man. The way they stand up for their kids and the way they talk sense into their kids. No bullshit. Like, no, for real, that gift, man, when someone sits you down and says, listen, man, let me tell you something. Let me tell you how things really work, rather than that poor person with the best intentions who's trying to explain something to you, but you just don't get it.
Exactly.
Not because they have bad intentions, but you need that someone to shake you up.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like thinking to myself, I'm like, man, these women are inspiring me, man. They're strong as hell. They don't have a lot. Education wasn't there, but look, they have that street wisdom that is like unmatched, So super random that you brought that up, because I thought about it thought about it yesterday, you know. Um, and
But
it's a
I'll tell
good,
you,
it's a good
I'll,
quality to have, to be honest.
yeah, Sam. I'll also tell you that when it comes to what we now refer to as the Mexican culture, the Mexican people, or Mexico in general, it's such a beloved part of the world from other people around the world for its beauty, for its people. But I'll tell you that there's such history with the people gravitate towards the Aztecs, but there was many tribes in Mexico long before it was even referred to as Mexico or called Mexico that have shaped the culture into what it is today. I've been to Mexico City, which is a dream of mine to go to Teotihuacan, the place where man becomes God, is what is translated to, and climb these pyramids and to see ruins that weren't completely toppled over, and it's for someone who comes from a culture that is a mixed culture with the combination of European, not only Spanish, but there was other people who invaded as well, with the native, the indigenous people, and then you become Mexican from that, or you become Guatemalan, or where you come from. There's a lot of new breeds or new people, new cultures that have been added to the list, and we're a young one. The invasion of Mexico happened in the 1500s. So but the reality is that, like, there's a conflict as well within you as well. When I went back to Spain for the first time, I felt a little conflicted. I speak Spanish. I am in a place where um, you know invaded um, what is modern day Mexico now, and I wondered what would they think of me? Am I like a wannabe Spanish? Am I not really, like, I don't know. I just had this really surprising reaction to being there. But I'll tell you, the people there, I fell in love with the country. I fell in love with the people. They fell in love with me. I was on a couple of TV shows. It was great. I had a really good time in Spain. But there are these complexities beyond, um, that are there, that some people will never care to look at. Others would love to embrace their cultural, indigenous roots, which is such a beautiful thing.
But I think that's kind of the crazy thing about education too, is that you can get an education so you can walk around and brag about your degree, like, oh, check me out, I have this, I have that. Or something I prefer a bit more is get an education for yourself, you know, learn
Mm,
more. Learn, man, we don't have enough time in this life to learn about everything, but learn as much as you can. And I like what you just said. Some people, it's true, some people don't care to learn about other things. But as a teacher, I've also learned that some people miss out on very awesome information because it just is never really properly explained. You can have maybe a professor or a teacher who has a ton of knowledge, ton of information, but doesn't exactly know how to convey that information to other people. you know Maybe I shouldn't judge that, maybe whatever, it's not their fault or whatever, but nevertheless it influences the receiver of that information. And so, to go back to that documentary that I'm watching, there is, in the first two seasons, there's this teacher that's like, oh my God. It reminds me of how one person can have such an amazing impact on someone's life. Never underestimate the power of just one person. You know,
amen. Yeah.
maybe don't walk around and, try to be someone's savior. I'm not saying that, but it's like the power of someone else caring enough to explain something to you, to make you feel less ignorant, a bit more informed. There's something powerful about that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the reason why a lot of people miss out on important information or interesting information. You could also look at, for example, British people. sometimes there's that ignorant idea, oh, Brits, they have that British English and they think they're better than everyone else. I've heard people in Europe, say that about people from Spain, like, oh yeah, they think they're better than it, or whatever. Yet I've met people from Spain, super cool people. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like, I don't know, man. Everyone has their own little vision of something, and sometimes it's accurate, or sometimes it's close to being accurate. But a lot of the times, it's so damn off. It's so damn off. Recently I finished reading this book called "The Four Agreements." Maybe you've
I
heard
love
of
that
it.
book. Love that
Oh
book.
my God, addicted. Hashtag addicted. I love that book. So remember that first chapter that he talks about? He talks about be impeccable with your word. I swear to you, Frank, I think about that stuff every freaking week, you know,
Mm,
because it's like someone gives you an opinion on something, but the question is, how did they attain that opinion? Like, where is that coming from? They don't like this. I wonder why. Like, what was their experience that caused them not to like that? Like, how did they decide not to like that? You know, Obviously, there are things in life where I get it, you don't like it, makes sense. But for some of these things, it's kind of like, um, how do you know? Do you even know these people? Have you ever talked to them? Have you ever tried to, I don't know, get to know their struggles, get to know um, their culture a little bit better. And believe me, coming from an Albanian culture where it's like ultra hospitable, not hospitable, ultra hospitable. I'll never forget in high school when one of my high school friends wanted to come with me to Montenegro, and I was like, all right, sure, let's do it. And so we went together, and she bought this little book with like just like first help type of phrases that you should know in Montenegro. And literally one of the first sentences was how to say no to food and how to tell people like, I'm full, thank you, I don't want any more. And that's exactly what she experienced when she was there. She experienced like people just like packing on food on her plate, like, oh no, no, please. And I remember thinking, I'm like, dude, how is she, how in the hell is she gonna eat all those 10 oranges that you just put in front of her? Like, that's humanly impossible. But it's that sense of, I have to make you feel hospitable, and that's wonderful and
yeah,
that's great. But then sometimes when people from those kinds of cultures are met with a brand new culture where people are not as expressive, they're not as, hey, come on in, what's up? Then they can have this judgmental view where it's like, oh God, they're so cold, or ooh. Well, not really, because I've gotten to know those people and they're not as cold as you think. They just need more time. You know what I'm saying? They need more time to get to know you. They need more time to open up, and that's okay you know so I'm grateful for these experiences because they've taught me there are different cultures, but there is no one like ideal culture. There isn't. you know
I agree.
teaching at
I'll
an
give you. I'll give you
no, please go ahead, go ahead.
can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Speaking of these dynamics or these the spectrum of even one culture. I went to Michoacan last year and to a small town like a pueblo. I'd never been to that far south of the border, and it was such a beautiful experience. And everyone shook your hand. I mean, multiple times a day. Everyone knew you were in town. That people want to talk to you. No one walked by someone without saying hello. Sort of what you're describing, right? And then we went on a plane to the capital, Mexico City, and God forbid if someone even said hi to you.
Mm,
And we're only a couple hours, same country, and it was just a different pace from a very slow pueblo pace to a very more upscale. People were kind of hurried to get to one place to another. So there's this spectrum of even regional practices of just how to be hospitable or just how to be, and I'll tell you that hearing your story about your country, I would love to tag along one day when you go back.
Hey, man, the doors are wide open. Come on. Don't make me have my dad call you and I'll be like, Frankie, you are welcome, please, whenever you want. Do you hear me? Now, listen, all jokes aside, it's an incredible country. I swear to God, it is. It's an incredible country. Me being Albanian by nationality, who was I talking to last night, man? We were talking about you know how sometimes when you go out for coffee with someone or dinner or whatever, in some cultures, people just they will fight you about the bill, the check. You know, for example, in the Swedish culture, that's not very common. Like it's very common for people to just split the bill. But in Montenegro, that's considered super
Hmm.
rude, like super rude, you know? And
Right.
so I just was like, I started laughing, man, because I'm like, yeah, dude, like that just doesn't look right. Like I remember when I was in New York visiting my cousins or whatever, and then there's the fight at the end of the damn dinner. It's like, no, I swear to God, no, I got it, I got it. No, I'm gonna get, no, I swear to God. I'm like, oh
Yeah.
God, please. So there are these elements that are, if you're in the culture, you just get it. You know what I mean? You
Right.
know, it's
Exactly.
it's like te
Exactly.
calmas or te calmo. You know what I mean? Like, how do you translate that shit?
Exactly.
Like, I'll never forget when I met my friend David Lopez at
Uh,
school, and he just randomly, I wasn't even aware of how similar our cultures are. He's obviously Mexican American, and he started telling me these things, how he's like, yeah, our aunt lives with us, and so it's really annoying because sometimes she'll just like touch my leg under the table and she'll be like, David, ¿por qué no te vas en tu cuarto? And I'm like, seriously? She said that to you? I'm like, dude, that sounds like my aunt. I swear to God, like, hey, why don't you go upstairs right now, huh? You know what that means? That means you're talking too much and you need to get the hell out of here right now. So I'm just like, dude, unbelievable how similar these things are. I don't know. I just, anyway, so, okay. I realize that it's 3:41 p.m. Los Angeles. Time flies, man. Time flies.
time flies. I'm having a great time.
If we had done this on Instagram, forget it. They would have kicked our ass out a long time ago. Okay, they would be like, get out. Okay,
You're having too
so
much fun. You're having too much
so
fun.
I loved it, man. Super nice.
Me too.
I told you before we started, I don't know what to expect. I'm not a pro at this, but whatever. Give it a try and see. It was really nice. I liked it so much. Shall we wrap it up right here?
Yeah. You know what? I let me wrap it up and say that I love your "Make Today Amazing." By the way, that's always behind you there as your little tag, your little hashtag there.
You
Um,
should know that I am a sucker for positive quotes. Anything that's connected to positive quotes belongs to me. Make
that's
today
right.
amazing. She believed she could, so she did.
I
Dedicated
love it.
to myself. Once again, just so we don't forget, she believed she could, so she did. Okay. I have my beautiful little, oh boy, you have not seen anything yet. My beautiful little calendar every single
Uh-huh.
morning, a brand new quote. And so it's always
Mm,
inspirational quotes. So I love it. Thank you for noticing. That's just Sam for you. I love this kind
I
of
know
stuff.
you.
So,
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for having me on. I'm going to suggest some guests that you can weed through and see if they fit your criteria. But I can't wait to see who we have on next, and I can't wait for our follow up. We need part two to this. I'm already ready for part two.
hey man, anytime, anytime. I felt even so shy to ask you because I didn't want to like bother you. I know you have your family, a lot of things going on, and I don't want to bug too much. But then I'm like, no, the fact that we were so rudely interrupted on Instagram, just something about that bugged me. And
Yeah,
honestly, not just you. I mean, I've talked to other people as well, and it's like we're in the middle of a conversation and then bam, it's gone. As you can see, I'm using Instagram every day. I love it in many ways, but it's not a great tool for these live conversations. So I'd rather just pre-record it and do a little podcasting on my YouTube
I
channel.
love it.
You
And we didn't touch too much on what happened after I got out, but we'll say that for next time. I do want to just mention and remind you and everyone else that um, it was an honor meeting you when we met, and it's been a pleasure being your friend for a number of years now, and to see what you've done with what you acquired. So back to what you were saying, it's not what they taught you, it's what you did with it. Um, your
Well,
Maverick
man,
lingo now, it's amazing, and I think about how the work you're doing is also liberating people. And I'm Mr. Liberation, I'm Mr. Freedom, so I know that there's other ways of being incarcerated or being imprisoned in your own limitations. And I always am the first to give credit and the first to admire someone who is obviously not a Spanish speaking individual, but are speaking or trying to speak Spanish. And I give them like a million points just because it's like, damn, they took the time to learn that language, to connect and to for whatever reason, whatever language. And it's great to see that you are allowing people to enhance who they are and also be better people. I think at the end of the day, that's what you're producing, just
well,
amazing people.
I'm really trying, and I was reading a book a while ago, about this spiritual teacher, who was going through a really, really rough time in his life. And so, like, he was one of those stories where he like woke up one day and then something just kind of clicked, like, oh, and then that started this whole new pattern of thinking. And then bam, 10, 15 years later, he's like the number one spiritual teacher in the world. Okay.
Mm,
But he mentioned something in one of his books. He said, I'm not, what did he say? He said, I'm not pushing life, life is pushing me, or something along those lines. But I felt a strong connection to it because every single day when I wake up, it's something that's in me. It's like I'm born. I wake up with this sense of fire, man. It's like I'm not satisfied until I have a fully productive day in front of me. You know,
mm,
when I think back to it, probably my background and my childhood has a lot to do with it, where it's like I think when you go through so many adversities in your life, difficulties, and everyone's difficulties are different, okay? um, Mine are nowhere near those you have endured. So but nevertheless, we both went through adversities, and I think that those adversities, if you choose to look at them as a blessing, rather than as a curse, you can achieve wonders in your life. There is like this sense of drive that like pushes you every single day. And in my case, I cannot sit still. I don't like to sit still. I don't like to sit and feel sorry for myself. I like to do something. And 3 years ago, nobody knew who Maverick Lingo is. Today, a few people know about it. Thank God I have my students. I work for myself. It's not quite where I want it to be, but slowly we're going there. And I don't see myself as some kind of savior for students, but I'm just sharing my story. And if it
mm-hmm.
appeals to someone, that makes me happy. You know what I mean? It's good. Many other people's stories have appealed to me and touched my heart and motivated me. So that's kind of how I see it. So thank you, and I appreciate it for noticing these things, and thank you for giving me your time. I really, really appreciate it for real, and then let's
Thank
plan
you,
that
Sam.
Montenegro trip as soon as
Yeah.
Corona is gone. It's funny because Montenegro, no, you know what's funny? Montenegro
What?
actually was the first country in Europe to beat Corona 2 months ago, but then unfortunately,
Hmm.
when
Party.
reopening, yeah, more cases came in. But yeah, it is what it is. We'll get through this.
We'll get there. We'll
We'll
get
get
there.
there.
Yeah.
We'll get there.
Well, Sam, have a great evening and make, like as you're saying, make today amazing.
My friend, thank you so
Okay.
much. Hugs to you, hugs to your family, and we'll talk soon again. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Bye bye. Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye bye bye. Thank you.